It is the custom in this parish to retain a week's wages in hand if he changes to another estate or stays to work his own ground or remains at home from sickness or other cause. He always loses this last week's hire. People are ignorant of the history of how often the state has colluded with the elites of Jamaica to create policies and laws that are specifically designed to stifle small businesses. Why do you think Jamaica Customs operate the way it does now for your little $500 worth of things that you're bringing in? But back to the history, because the records are there to show us how many times the government and the elites have fought out the economic efforts of black people. At another time, I'm going to go into the history of the landed gentry and how some families came in possession of thousands of acres while the rest of us still have to be begging for something from NHD. But today, I'm reading from a book called Color for Color, Skin for Skin. Now remember, emancipation was in 1834, which means that we were supposedly no longer slaves, right? So workers were moving on. They had access to little plots of land. They were growing their crops, right? They were feeding their families and they were content with that. But now came the problem of these plantations still existing without slaves to work them. The production of sugar, more than the production of any other exportable tropical crops in the island, more than cattle or horse breeding, required a large, consistently reliable and accessible labor force. That is, estate Negroes. To do this, a state of dependency had to be created to subject the laborers to the requirements of the estates. Hence, the plantocracy and its allies invariably reacted in a hostile manner to blacks who showed a certain degree of independence. For example, William Carr, magistrate and proprietor of Riversdale and Newhall estates in St. Thomas in the Vale, said, "I should be glad if they would be dependent on my capital. The Negroes are not like those in Barbados. They are not dependent upon estates for their livelihood. That is the great cause of our non-prosperity. No doubt that is the root of all the evil. Their very independence is an evil." Large landed proprietor, member of the Assembly and Custos, Peter Espute, expressed similar views. He said, "Continuous labor are very badly off. I mean persons that will work on estates whenever their services are required. But it so happens that they do not do it. They have their own patches to cultivate, and you very often find that they are doing that when you require them." In other words, how dare these Negroes be working their own land, be growing their own food when their bodies are needed for labor on the estates? An unnamed planter also expressed his view. "The people are too independent, too well off here. They work for us only 4 days in the week and hang about their own properties or go to market on the other 2. We cannot improve our estates without a full week's labor." Everything had to be done, therefore, to make laborers less independent, less fickle, less arbitrary and uncertain. Above all, they were to be made propertyless, without the means to make their own living. Since access to the smallest patch of land, including rented land, represented hope and possibility, they invariably adopted a hostile, intolerant position steeped in race and class chauvinism in their relationship to the black population, whose role was to be a class of menials at the perpetual service of white people. And this is why it's important that the real facts of our history are told. Because too often we have people who are the very subject of these labor restrictions, the people who these systems of dependency was designed to keep at the bottom. Too often we have those people defending the very system because they don't understand that It is by design to keep certain people at the top as the holders of economic power and to keep certain people at the bottom in a state of dependency, and that it is all structured around race. The book also went on to give examples of how the plantocracy implemented this regime of dependency. It says, Mary Williams, a laborer of Holland Estate, for example, had to work 10 hours daily, 5 days weekly, weeding 25 chains of sugarcane each day for 6 pence per day, or 2 shillings and 6 pence per week. Williams, however, ended up getting 1 shilling each week because the estate management took 4 bits for rent. 60% of her weekly pay, the cost for weeding 75 chains of cane. In another case, Anne Wedderburn, a laborer who was born on Holland Estate and never worked anywhere else, worked every day for the year except on Sundays and when she fell ill. She was always owed 1 week's wages by the estate management. Accordingly, she said, if I work last week, I should not get paid till the following Tuesday. In this regard, Harvey and Bruin noted that, quote, it is the custom in this parish to retain a week's wages in hand for the avowed purpose of ensuring the return of the laborer to his work. The latter asserts that if he changes to another estate or stays to work his own ground or remains at home from sickness or other cause, he always loses this last week's hire. The wage regime, which gave the planters the power to deduct, reduce, withhold, and abolish wages, became a major instrument for the creation of a dependent labor force, especially since these planters and the state which they composed had power over land distribution. The fact that there are black people now who are participating in this system of labor oppression and labor exploitation does not make it any less racist and does not make it any less of a system that is oppressive to black people. It is beneficial to the elite class to have a small number of black people among their numbers, because as long as we, the laboring class, can see that there are a few people who are there who look like us, and as long as they keep feeding us and we keep believing this ideology of out of many one people, as long as we buy into this system that if we just work a little more harder, if we just do a little more overtime, if we take on a second job, if we just do, as long as we keep buying into this notion that it is because we are not working hard enough why we don't have what they have, as long as we ignore the historical design of the current structure and buy into the facade that they want to sell us, then there is no possibility of us rising up and revolting against them.